Okay, so here we go. Simply Romans, exactly. See, we know where we're at. And this is an interesting coincidence that we're in an election year. So today is all about your relationship with the government. Really? Yes. So what do we do? So here's the issue. We're in Romans where we've gotten past chapter 8. And, we already know because we got through chapter 8, and we're well past that, we're into 13 now, that we've been made right with God, or the technical word for use for that is justified. So what was between you and God that separated you has been taken care of. And that's what he covered in the first 8 chapters. That's what's just great about the gospel. So he says that's been taken care of. But now that there's nothing between you and God, that offense has been taken away, and God has promised we won't talk about it anymore, which, by the way, is part of your process of forgiveness with other people. When someone asks you forgiveness, you say, I forgive you for that. And by the way, we're not going to speak of it anymore. That's the great follow-up. But that's what God has said with our problems. He says we're not going to talk about it anymore. If that's the case, then now that we walk day by day, how are we supposed to walk? How are we supposed to live? Because if in false religions, doing good day by day is how you earn favor with God, and now we know that how you walk day by day has nothing to do with earning favor with God. It's what Christ did for us that earns favor. So if that's the case, then if I have no motivation to be good because I have to earn favor with God, then what's my motivation to be good? Or like I like to say, since I'm a pastor, I'm paid to be good, but you have to be good for nothing. And that's just totally false too. But it's a really interesting question. If you take away the motivation of pleasing God and earning your justification, then why do we live the way we do after justification, after we're made right with God? How do you think? What do you do? So that's where we were at. We got to chapter 12, and that's where he switches into this whole topic. We talked about how, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed. He also talked about the fact that in the body of Christ, where we're sitting right now and larger, not just us, that we all have unique gifts so that we can serve one another, and the gifts are different so that collectively we get one thing done, which is glorifying God, but none of us has the same giftedness necessarily, but we all have some giftedness in that sense. So he talked about that and how to even live with your enemies. But today we're going to switch over in chapter 13 and talk about how do you live with your government. And we say that all the time. How can I live with that government? And it's a complicated issue, so to try and uncomplicate it, we're going to start a discussion in terms of being citizens of the land with this guy right here. Wyatt Earp. My man, Wyatt Earp. He is going to represent for us the government. And actually, during the Wild West, during the middle and end of the 19th century, you would not leave the East Coast of the United States and come west, because the further west you went, the more you took your life in your own hands. The more unruly it got, there was less law. And when you were back east on the East Coast, there were policemen, there was rules, things were pretty orderly. But man, you don't even have to go past the Mississippi. You get into Missouri and Iowa and stuff like that. It was just craziness. And if you went way west into Wyoming and the territories and down in Arizona, it was crazy, crazy, crazy. Tombstone, Arizona? Right? And the only way that you could preserve any justice was with a gun. And many times it was to defend yourself, because it was just craziness. So there was a real sense during the 19th century in the West in America that there was no justice in the West, right? And it was a dangerous place to be, and you go out there at your own risks. Who knows what could happen to you? So when you got to a town where there was a sheriff, you'd go, finally, someone who's going to bring order to this place. But guys like Wyatt Earp are kind of a mixed bag. But even still, even though they were in town, it was nice when guys like this would show up on your front porch with a gun pointed at you. And you'd say, well, wait a second. Who's going to protect me from guys like that? Well, fortunately, guys like Wyatt Earp, the sheriff, would come and he'd put these guys in jail. He'd, show his guns in front of them. And it was a good thing, because it actually brought order to the area. To the degree to which the sheriff could do what he did, he brought order, and that was good. So in terms of government, that's a good part of government. It protects you and it creates order, and there's nothing wrong with that. We take it for granted most of the time, but remember, think Wild West. That's what it's like in 19th century America, and that's what it's like throughout a lot of the world right now. Not only did these guys arrest them, but they would also Kill him. You could, if this guy was incorrigible and you couldn't put him in jail long enough, you'd finally say, you know what, for the best of this community, this guy's got to go. And so this is also what went on. And they were authorized to do this. You know, after they go through a trial, they were authorized to do this kind of stuff. So this was actually good, even though it was brutal. It brought order to the places. You could live peacefully in the West as long as you didn't do what the outlaws did. Now, talking about Wyatt Earp in specific, Wyatt Earp was a mixed bag. There was a good part of Wyatt Earp, and a lot of his history, when you read about his life, he was a constable in some places. He was also a city policeman in some places. He was also a county sheriff. That's what he did a lot down in Arizona. He was a deputy U.S. Marshal for a while. Those are all very laudable positions, and the job is to bring order and to prosecute the bad guys. And if you were a bad guy, if you were breaking the law, if you were making life bad for other people, you had to fear guys like this, right? OK Corral. Wyatt Earp is there. But he's got a seamier side. He was also a buffalo hunter, which tragically overhunted the buffalo. He was a miner and took advantage of mining rights in many areas. In fact, he followed the mining stuff going on across the country. He was not only in the California mining, he also was he was here in Idaho, in Eagle, Idaho for a while. And he was doing stuff there. He went up to Nome, Alaska. So anywhere where there was mining going on for silver or gold, he went with it and did some kind of shady stuff. In fact, one of the things he did most often in the places where this mining was going on was he would open a saloon. So he did a boxing referee. He was a saloon keeper. Also in some places, he was a bouncer. Actually, at his own saloon, he was a bouncer. But he was such a good bouncer, he bounced for other people as well. Kind of brutal. He was a gambler. He was an incredible gambler. He gambled. He was known more for gambling at the time than he was for keeping the law. He was quite the gambler. Again, he would go into these mining efforts that were going on all across the country at the time. He would set up a saloon. He would bring people in who had lots of cash because of the gold and silver they dug out. And then he would sit down at the tables in his own saloons and gamble with them and take their money from them. This is Wyatt Earp. He was a very capable guy. Not only that, one of the things that the West needed in these mining towns when they had a lot of money was women. And so he was a pimp as well as a brothel owner. Wyatt Earp. So now look at the two sides of this coin for Wyatt Earp. You got on the left side, you got this guy who brings order to an area. Order, quote unquote, order. He's supposed to take care of the bad guys, and he did take care of bad guys. And then you've got this guy who's involved in very exploitive activities for the people who've got money. So do we totally endorse the life of Wyatt Earp? No. But there's something about the authority he held as a deputy marshal or those things that we do need to respect. And so here's our double-mindedness coming into this morning, and Paul's going to talk about this, is that here's a guy who brought order, but he was also a dirtbag. So how do you relate to someone who brings order and authority while at the same time they're exploitive and they're dirtbags? And you could say that of any government, including our own. They bring order, but they're exploitive dirtbags. Just to put it mildly. And now, before we get off too far on this pointing fingers, we are all exploitive when we sin. We are all dirtbags when we sin. So we're talking about government that's occupied by people that are just like you. So that's what we're talking about. But here's the problem. How do you relate to a government that's full of people like you who tend toward exploitiveness and doing bad things to each other? How do you relate to it? Do you submit to it? Do you submit to Earp? Well, let's just see what happens. So that's where Paul's going to go. By the way, I want to tell you this, and I was researching the life of Wyatt Earp. He died in 1929 in Los Angeles, California. Yeah, 1929 Los Angeles. And you know what happened in Los Angeles in 1929? The Graf Zeppelin made its first trip to Los Angeles from Tokyo. And you know what else happened in Los Angeles in 1929? Absolutely famous. Everyone in Los Angeles knows this. It was the absolute first year of the Academy Awards. That was the year Wyatt Earp died. That's just so weird. Okay, that's not what we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about what Paul taught. How are we good citizens of the land? How do we do this? Now, before we do this, one more caveat. We got to put our mindset back in Paul's time. In Paul's time in Israel, the ruling government had two kind of factions. There was the Jewish religious government, which had preceded Rome, and then there was Rome. So if you asked a Jew at the time of the first century in Palestine, who is the legitimate rulers here, they would say our religious authorities, the Sanhedrin. But then there was also Rome. So many of the Jews looked at Rome as being an illegitimate government. They were occupiers. If they said something, we didn't have to do it unless they threatened to kill us, and then, of course, we would do it. But they weren't seen as legitimate authority. They were kind of interlopers in that sense. So we'll listen to the Sanhedrin, we'll listen to the Jews, but I don't know if we'll listen to the Romans. Well, Paul is going to address the fact that we need to respect the Romans too. And that just stuck in their throats like a crawl. They just couldn't handle that because Jewish authority was bad enough and corrupt enough and hypocritical enough. But Rome, no, never. They're pagans. We do not respect the authority of Rome. So that's a lot of what he's working against right now. We share that in many respects because we seldom want to obey or recognize the authority of a government that's broken and pagan and not Christian. So you have the same mindset, they have it. So that's what Paul's going to do against. How are we good citizens of the land? Here we go. Chapter 13, verse 1. So let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there's no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. The Jewish Sanhedrin and the Romans, and our state governments, and our federal governments, and Wyatt Earp. See, there's this mixed bag thing always sticks with us. These are instituted authorities. Wyatt Earp as well. He's a great example. Verse 2, therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. You mean I have to do everything the government says? Hold that question just for a second, because he's going to qualify it for a second here. But do you notice a word that keeps getting repeated in these two verses? Authorities, 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 authorities. Instituted by God. So there is a sense in which he's saying here, I'm not endorsing the man necessarily, I'm not endorsing the Wyatt Earps in your government, but you do have to recognize that whoever they are, the authority has been given to them by God. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have a bad ruler. And like I said, about this time, maybe a little after, but about this time, Nero became the Caesar in the Roman Empire. Nasty, nasty little kid. He was a teenager when he... Nasty, nasty, nasty. And from him went on a whole series of Caesars that were just nasty. But still, it's Rome, and it's an authority that's instituted by God. Why? Well, it brings order. But they're dirtbags. I know. See, and that's the split mind that we have. Authorities, and this is where, I can't remember what I have on the next slide here. Yeah, let me give you an example, because the examples here will help clarify it. Let's use this example. Paul's in Jerusalem. When we read in Acts 23, it's near the end of Acts. He's back in Jerusalem. He causes a real row, and the Romans arrest him because he's disturbing the peace, basically is what it is. And then they decide, the best way to deal with this is to give him to the Jewish authorities, because the Roman authorities don't want to deal with it. See the two governments in place? So they give him to the Jewish authorities, and he gets in front of the Jewish authorities, the council, and let's see if Paul lives out his own admonition in Romans 13. So watch what happens. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day. Verse 2, and the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. And Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet contrary to the law, you order me struck? Verse 4, those who stood by said, would you revile God's high priest? He just said this to the high priest. Highest guy in charge of that government, right? Now what's Paul's response? Now right here before I show you, Paul could have done a couple of things. He could have repented and said, oh, I'm sorry, didn't know. Or he could say, well, I don't care who you are, you're still wrong. Let me quote you some Old Testament, buddy. Now which one respects the local authority? And is it a matter of right and wrong from Paul's position? So here's what Paul does in response. Look at this closely. This is cool. And Paul said, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest. For it's written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Exodus 22. Now, Was Paul correct in terms of his accusation against the high priest? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it did not give him the permission to disrespect the man's authority. And you hear it in the way he responded. I'm sorry, I didn't know he was the high priest. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have said this if I'd known that. So now you start to see Paul's conscience. He does respect the position and the authority of the high priest, but he's still right in his accusations. Now, you let your mind go for a second. You think through what Jesus did with the high priest with the same guys. Now, there was a time when Jesus did say, I don't care who you are. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Remember, end of Matthew? Now, why was it right for Jesus to do that, and it's wrong for Paul to do that? Because Jesus is the authority over them. Paul's not in this case. They are the authority over him right here. See that? So Paul respects that authority, and when Jesus rails against the hypocrites, Pharisees, and Sadducees, he's speaking as their authority. Woe to you. When he says woe to you, he's saying it's coming to get you, and my judgment's coming. Woe to you. You guys ought to be shaking in your boots because you are hypocrites. And then he goes through and he tells them how they're hypocrites. So the truth about the nature of their hearts is the same from Paul as it is from Jesus, but the difference is that Paul knows he's under their authority and he needs to respect them. He can still speak the truth, but he's got to be careful how he does it. See that? By the way, he says, you shall not speak evil of a ruler. Now this is not just Paul's pride speaking that he's mad with them. He's actually saying you're doing an evil thing. But you should not speak evil of the ruler of your people. So you got to be careful how you do this. There's an issue here that truth is truth, evil, good and bad are all there, but somehow in the process, when you are under subjection to someone who's an authority to you, you have to do it the right way. Somehow you have to communicate you respect the position of their authority, but you can still point out how they're wrong. We had a discussion this morning before church started about that, just living in government. When government does wrong things, and government does a lot of wrong things. I mean, there's just no question about that. Government does, and in the time of Paul, the government did a lot of wrong things. But the issue is how do you remain under authority and yet speak your heart in a way that truth resides in that place? That's the tricky part. So Paul's really aiming at those people in his time who said, Rome is an illegitimate government. The Jewish Sanhedrin is a legitimate government. We will obey the last one, but not the first one. We will not obey the Roman government because it's illegitimate. It's pagan. And Paul's saying, no. They're as much an authority as anybody is, because God allowed them. Let me read you a couple others. This laid in from the press before the press is rolled. A couple other places. John 19, this is where Jesus is standing in front of Pilate. Remember that? And Pilate's interrogating Jesus. Pilate said to him, you will not speak to me? This is John 19:10. You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? Now, does he? Yes, he's got that right. So how does Jesus respond to him, since Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? Interesting. Jesus answers him in verse 11 of John 19. You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. So he's actually underwriting his authority, and that your authority has been given from above, and yes, indeed, you do have the power to release me or to crucify me. You do. But it's been given to you, which is a nice way of warning him, saying, now listen, you've been given this authority. You better watch out how you use it, because it's been given to you from someone from a higher authority, God himself. And then he goes on and says, therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. So it's his way of saying, you're just going to do your job, Pilate. I get that, because that authority has been given to you. But it's been given to you. You are answerable to where you got your authority from. So don't mess up here. But the one who delivered me to you has the bigger problem. It's not really you. It's the one who delivered me. Another place, it's an interesting way in which Jesus respects and warns him about the greater authority. You're going to answer. Acts 4, this is a great one. Acts 4:15. Peter and John did the unspeakable thing. They went to the temple one day and they healed a lame guy at the entry to the temple. This guy had been there a long time, we know. It caused a huge stir because now we're having miracles going on in the backyard of the Pharisees and Sadducees. I hate this, they would say. These guys are doing this, and to make it worse, They healed this lame guy that everybody knows about. Everybody knows about. He's in public view. They healed him, and they gave credit to Jesus. I hate this stuff. So the religious authorities decided they needed to do something, right? That's the whole story in Acts 4. Great, you got to go read it. Great story. So I'm going to fast forward to Acts chapter 4, verse 15. The council, that is the Jewish Sanhedrin, the leaders, the Jewish leaders, met together and confronted Paul, and then they sent him out of the room. Verse 15, but when they had commanded them to leave the council, they conferred with one another. This is Peter and John, by the way. I think I might have misspoke. They conferred with one another, saying to each other, so what shall we do with these men? I mean, for that a notable sign has been performed through them. It's evident to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. You can't deny what they've done. We just can't deny it. Verse 17. But in order that it may spread no further among the people, let's warn them to speak no more to anyone in this name, the name of Jesus. So don't talk to anyone about Jesus or anything about this healing. Just go on your way, and we'll just let it go. Let's just stop talking about it. So they called Peter and John, back in verse 18, called them and charged them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them. Okay, now remember, you have to be respectful to authority, but you have to do what's right. So how do you respect the authority of the Sanhedrin when they're asking him to do something that's wrong, but still respect their authority? Okay, listen carefully to their response. That's great. This is what Peter and John said. Whether it's right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard. He said, you're right. It's up to you to judge. You guys are in charge. You're the authority. But hey, we can't stop speaking about what we've seen and heard. But you can still judge. See how he respected their authority and still said, but we're going to do this anyway? Another really good example, Daniel. We saw Daniel 2 this morning. Daniel 6. Remember this? I'll give you a little background by just reading it for you. Daniel 6:6. This is during the time of the Persians and Medes, and Darius now is he's in charge of this place. Daniel's in captivity with his friends from Israel. Anyway, the high officials and the satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the counselors, the governors, are all agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions." So he's saying, if anyone else is praying and they're not praying to you, Darius, I think you should write a law that says they get cast in the lion's den. What do you think? And we're all in agreement about this. All of your leaders are in agreement about this. Now, O king, they go on, establish the injunction, sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the injunction. For 30 days, no one can pray to anyone except Darius the king. Verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he's doing this on purpose. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem, and he got down on his knees 3 times a day, and he prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. And then the men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before God, and they arrested him. And they threw him in the lion's den. And you know how the story ended? He got eaten by the lions and he died. No, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. No, God saved him from that. But see what happens here. Darius made a law, signed a law that all these officials agreed with. And then Daniel, on hearing that this had been signed, decided to do exactly what he had done before. He didn't hide himself. He went right in front of the same windows, knelt down and prayed 3 times a day. 3 times a day, doing what he felt was right. Now, was that disrespectful of the authority? Was he just being a civil disobedient kind of freak? Was that wrong for him to do? Should he have obeyed what these leaders, through Darius' signature, had said? Wouldn't it have been more respectful, maybe even just to close the windows to not provoke the issue? Well, he let them arrest him. And if you read later in that chapter in Daniel 6, you'll see that he submits to authority. He's just going to do what he's going to do because his bigger king is God himself. So those are just a few examples. You see this all through Scripture. There's this knife edge we have to live on where we respect the office and the authority because that's been given by God, but it's full of people who are sinful. Respect the authority, but follow God. And this is where it gets kind of touchy because God gave him the office of the authority. Now, how he carries it out is up to him and his sinful thoughts. But he's got the authority. So he's got the right given by God to do what he's going to do, but he's going to be answerable to a higher authority, just like Jesus reminded Pilate. And we have to recognize that that authority has come from God. We don't have to endorse what they decide because it can be very sinful. I mean, if you were living in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, you would not endorse what the government did for the Holocaust. That's just wrong. That's wrong. And yet, this is hard to swallow. The authority to rule was something that God allowed them to have, even though they carried it out wrongly. So it's another way also when we go back to the Pilate-Jesus interaction. Those who are given that kind of authority by God to bring order to a place are going to be answerable for misusing that authority. Our response as being under that authority is to respect the office of that authority because that office is given by God. But in the cases we just saw, like with Peter and John and with Daniel and with more and with Paul, they respected the authority while at the same time saying, but what you're doing is wrong. That's a tricky business. Well, we'll flesh this out a little bit right here because this is tricky. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct. That is, if you do what's right, they shouldn't be a terror to you, but they're a terror to bad conduct. If we do bad in this system, they'll do bad, and Wyatt Earp will come after us with his gun. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority, which again, for their case, was the Romans, which they said was illegitimate? Yeah, you should have fear for the one who's in authority, who's in the office of that authority. Well then, do what is good, and you'll receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. So the government, the authority of the government that God allows to come into place is there for your good. Now, if you go back to 19th century West in America, yeah, that authority was for your good, even though it was full of people who abused it. But it did bring some order. It did bring justice in some cases. Was it perfect? No. But it was better than nothing where it's anarchy. So in a real sense, what Paul's saying here is there's two ends of the spectrum in government that are wrong. One is anarchy. That is, government's wrong altogether. We don't need governments. Anarchy is actually wrong because God authorizes that authority. But the other end of the spectrum, totalitarianism, is also wrong because it's used for personal purposes and not for the good of the people. So the government is meant to operate somewhere between anarchy and totalitarianism, and yet that authority is given by God. And you need to respect it, is what he's saying. Whew. But now, if you do wrong, be afraid. If you do wrong, it's like, I get this. If you do wrong, when you are subject to the authority, the offices of authority that God has endorsed, he's given them that authority. If you do wrong, you can expect to be afraid because God is using the present government authorities to enforce judgment right now. Right now. So be afraid. This does not give you any right to be able to just do whatever you want to do. You need to be afraid. For he doesn't bear the sword in vain. And when you see the sword, you're thinking capital punishment. He doesn't bear it in vain, with no usefulness. It is useful in terms of in bringing order to a place. For he is the servant of God, an avenger. So, Christians should never look at government and say it's illegitimate. They should look at the authority of government and say, God is using the authority and power of government to bring order and to bring judgment. Is it perfect? No. Is the justice perfect? No. But in some cases, it does bring order and it's beneficial to those who do good. And you have to recognize that. You do. Because without that, it's anarchy. And anarchy is a horrible place to live. And God recognizes that in the now. He's a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Government? Yes. That's Wyatt Earp right there. That's what government does. It brings order so that those who choose to do good can live in an orderly and peaceful life. Again, we're not saying we endorse everything that government does, but you do have to recognize that it does some good, and by God's design. Okay? That's all we're saying. That's all we're saying. Now this brings up an interesting thing. Therefore, one must be in subjection. That's just recognizing that it's over you. You must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. So not only to avoid God's wrath, the consequences, but also for the sake of conscience. You should not go around doing unlawful things because you can call the government illegitimate. We were just watching a series on the 60s on TV, and that's exactly what all my friends were saying in the 60s. We will disobey the government because it's illegitimate. Well, biblically, that is not right. Biblically, the government is there by God's design to bring some order and good for us. If we do good, if we do wrongdoing, be afraid. But if you're good, then that's what's supposed to be there. So no, anarchy is not in the Bible. But godly endorsement of the office of government is, believe it or not. So that in this meantime, before we get to heaven, God can bring some level of order and justice through a government. And then we bring up taxes. Since, by the way, if you don't know what today is, it's April 16. Tomorrow's the 17th. They've given you until tomorrow if you haven't done your taxes yet. Okay, just saying. Today's 17, 18, there we go. But they've given you until tomorrow. Just. I was actually banking on that, so that's okay. So Paul brings up an interesting thing here. Not only is the government legitimate to bring justice and judgment upon wrongdoers, you've got to pay for them to do it. Are you kidding me? You mean if Rome, the illegitimate government, who does horrible things, you mean I'm supposed to pay for that service they do for us? Are you kidding me? Yes. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For the authorities are ministers of God attending to this very thing. They benefit by bringing order to your life, sometimes disorder too. But to the degree to which they bring order to your life and peace and judgment against wrongdoers, you need to pay for that because they did that service for you and you need to pay them back. It's exactly what Jesus was saying when he said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Because Caesar actually did bring order to Palestine in the first century. Caesar built roads all over the world. Do you use those roads? Well, then you need to pay for those roads, okay? Yeah, but he does bad things. He kills my relatives for no good reason. Well, we're not paying him for that. But what he does do that's good for you, you need to pay for that. And you need to render to God what's God's. What has God done for you? What has God ongoing done for you? Are you paying him for that? That's why Jesus answered the way he did. They're attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them. So you have a debt to government because of what they do. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed. That's a very pointed comment about government. Honor to whom honor is owed. That's a very pointed thing about government as well. Now, I could, as an example, bring up our current president and say, I don't care what you think of the man, you need to always respect the office. That's very important. And next time there might be a man that gets in that's better or worse, and it doesn't matter if they're better or worse, you still have to respect the office of that man. In fact, honor him and respect. And then you're saying, well, this is just wrong. Can we just pull this part out of the Bible? It's easier for me to look at these guys and say, they're all dirtbags. I don't have to do what they say. Well, you don't have to do what they say, but you do have to respect what their office says. And that's the important distinction here. So when you start to separate the man from the office, it makes it easier to understand what God's asking of us. Exactly like with Wyatt Earp. I'm glad that Wyatt Earp is in town. He's enforcing justice and things aren't, going to pot all around me, that he takes in the guys who are doing wrong stuff, like stealing my cattle and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to stop obeying Wyatt Earp just because I happen to know he used to run brothels. Just see what I'm saying? So it's his office that's important here. Okay, now Paul switches from citizens of the land, which is this, to an interesting thing, citizens of the kingdom. Because did you know that you have dual citizenship? Did you know that? You are not only citizens of this land, but you're citizens of a new kingdom. Whose kingdom? Well, God's kingdom. And if you remember, we talked about this some time back. God's kingdom is interesting right now because as theologians talk about it, God's kingdom is already but not yet. Excuse me? Well, it means that, where Jesus rules, where he has dominion, like over our hearts, his kingdom is already here. It's coming. But it's not fully done yet. Someday, all the sin will be gone and all that stuff will be behind us. So in a real sense, his rule as king in this kingdom is started already. It's already here, but it's not yet fulfilled yet. So in this time right now, before the kingdom of God comes in its fullness, before the old kingdom goes away and the new kingdom comes, in this period of time right now, we're dual citizens. And so he's going to talk about your role in the land as a dual citizen. Okay? So he's going to talk about these two. He's split them. Let's talk about your role as a citizen in the kingdom now already. And this is where he goes on. This is where he brings up Wayne. This is where he brings up his law instead of just the law of the land. So this is interesting. Let's see what he asks us to do as kingdom citizens here. Owe no one anything except to love each other. Owe no one anything except to love. Hey, that's the new rule. That's what citizens of the kingdom do in this place. It's not only just about not speeding down Main Street. It's about taking the initiative to love people. That's the new law. And he says it explicitly here. What's that? And paying your debts, yeah. Okay. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Now we're talking about the kingdom law in that sense. Okay, to love one another. Citizens of the kingdom have the law of loving one another. That, by the way, is your law while you're here as a dual citizen. You're here to love. How do you do that? Yeah, that's the problem. That's why when Jesus was approached by that guy who said, tell me the biggest commandment, tell me what I'm supposed to do. Well, love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, heart, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And remember at the end of Matthew, Jesus talks about the judgment. Remember the sheep and the goats? And he says, listen, to the degree you did this to the least of these, you've done this to me. What was the least of these? You fed them, you clothed them, you loved them materially and in every way you could think of. You loved the people that you're with. So that's what citizens of the kingdom look like. And that is radically different from the citizens of the land. Have you noticed that? There's nothing in the Constitution of the United States that says you have to love each other. But in the Constitution of God's kingdom, it says that's the rule. You have to love. You have to love. And as a result, as we are citizens of this other place, of this other kingdom, living in this land, we're not only people who obey and subject ourselves to the rulers, even when they're dirtbags, but even despite all that, we honor them and respect their office, and we take the initiative not only not to do wrong, but to do lots of good by loving. And that distinguishes us. A lot of people live their life in the land saying, I'll do what I want to do as long as I don't get caught. But there's nothing into this not selfish. Well, in God's kingdom, is nothing about selfishness at all. It's about loving someone else. And remember, biblical love defined is setting your will for the best of another. That's what it is. So now we distinguish ourselves in this land not only by obeying the law of this land, but obeying the law of that kingdom, which is to take the initiative to love. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, shall not murder, shall not steal, shall not covet, any of the other commandments. Okay, all that stuff we're talking about right there are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's easy. It's hard. But understanding it is easy. Citizens of the kingdom, that's us, living with this dual citizenship, have the propensity, like Jesus did, to love despite how you're treated. And that sets you apart as a kingdom citizen. And that's why he's left us here instead of snatching us out of here when we came to obey him. He's left us here so that people will say, what's wrong with those people? Not only do they not speed down Main Street, but they're looking for opportunities to help people all the time. What gives? They must have an angle. They must be using people somehow. Well, no. And that's what's different. Citizens of the kingdom fulfill the law like this. And Jesus himself said the very thing. If you love, you've done everything else. You've considered the best of others. So, just to say the obvious, love does no wrong to a neighbor, right? Right. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. So, in the land, there are hundreds of laws of what you do and don't do, mostly what you don't do. But in the law of the kingdom in which you are half citizen as well, you're common citizen on both, the law is love. That's what we're called to do. It's a love. Now that was the already. Right now, while we are kingdom citizens here, but what about the not yet? What does the fact that the kingdom is coming to fullness, still to come on the timeline, have anything to do with how I live right now? And that's where Paul will talk about next. That's what he does next. So here's where he goes. 11, besides this, you know the time that the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. And that's why I put a picture of the dawn right here. You know, as Christians, we can tell that the time of darkness is coming to an end. And that's going to end with a ferocious judgment. But there's a sense in which the momentum of this world is going to soon come to an end. The darker it gets, then suddenly light will come. And that's what Paul's saying. You all know this. You are citizens of the kingdom of God as well as the citizens of the land. And you know this is coming to an end. That by itself should give you some motivation to change how you walk tomorrow. Because, it's all coming to an end pretty soon. Which means not overly investing in a selfish sense into this place. You know what I mean? Jesus talked about that a lot, about this guy who had this great harvest one year, and just food after food after food. And he said, boy, this is great. All I have to do is get a bigger barn so I can store it all. He's investing in the now tremendously. And then God asked his life of him. What's it profit you to own the whole world and lose your soul? So there's a sense in which all of this is coming to an end. This is temporary. And that's what he's getting at. That's how knowledge of the kingdom that is still yet to be changes what you do now. You don't get carried away investing here. You do good. You love. But the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. You know the time. It's just like when the dawn's coming, you know the day is coming. Salvation is nearer to us now than when we first believed. Now, a lot of people look at that and they kind of mince words and say, you mean I don't have salvation yet until he comes back? No, that's not what Paul's saying. In fact, you look at all the places he uses salvation, he many times looks at it as kind of a continuum. You start when you're justified, made right with God, and then the fullness of the benefit of that justification comes when Jesus comes, the fullness of it. And it starts now. So that's all he's saying. It'll come to completion. That salvation you've started into a justification will come to completion. But it's nearer now than when you first believed. So you need to start unplugging from this place, is all he's saying, because this is coming to an end. And the power and the lights are going to be turned off here. And then his kingdom starts in full. That's all he's saying. And you can tell this is coming, just like the dawn. And then he uses that illusion. The night is far gone. That's this place. But the day is at hand. So then let's cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Start unplugging from this place, because the time is soon where the switch is going to happen. So put off the works of darkness. And how do you do this? Well, verse 13, let us walk properly as in the daytime, fully appearing what we're doing, not hiding in the darkness what we do. Walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. And that's just the short list. He's got much longer lists in other places. But he's saying, you need to look at that stuff and say, that's stuff of the here and now. That's the stuff of this land. We need to start unplugging from that stuff and realize that, the day's changing, and that's going to go with that stuff. I think the reason he mentions this stuff is because this was the stuff that was the most tempting in the Jewish Christian culture to get involved in with the pagan culture, was this stuff. And by the way, they're not alone. We have that same problem now. There is an allure to sin that's part of this place, that's part of this dark place, and soon the sunrise will come and Jesus will return and all that stuff will be washed away and that's gone. So stop investing in that junk. That's all he's saying. Because that's not part of what we're all about. But put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Put on the Lord Jesus. What the heck does that mean? Put on the Lord Jesus Christ? Well, if you came here today with a jacket, it's exactly what you do when you put your jacket back on. He's using exactly the same terms they use for when you put on a jacket. So don't transform yourself, put on Christ. And that's why Paul can, in one of his other letters, he can say, Paul, or Saul, his previous name, I have been crucified with Christ. And it's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me. He's put on Christ. And the life I now live in this flesh, in this body, I live by faith in the Son of God who died and gave himself up on my behalf. So this is how life goes after that. He's saying, take that off, put that stuff aside, unplug from that junk because the darkness of the junk world is going to go away, and instead put on Christ. And what did Christ do? He spent his entire life for the best of others, all the way to the point of death. And that's replicated now as his Spirit is in us. When we live for the best of others, that's love, and it could actually end up in your death. But there's a more fundamental distinction right here, and you can see it right here. See the bottom line? Make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. You can live tomorrow gratifying your desires and your appetites or gratifying the desires of Christ. You can go one of two ways. And if you gratify the desires of Christ, it's totally selfless. So the real message throughout the New Testament and the Old is the sons of God, the daughters of God, the children of God, are those who do not live day to day ruled by the appetites of their desires, but instead seek to please God himself. Or put it in a simpler way when Jesus is in the garden, nevertheless, not my will be done, but your will be done. It's a total life of selflessness. Now, when I explain this to people, they say, that's Christianity? I go, yeah. It's cool. Jesus was like that, and we just love that, and we do that too. Selflessness. Well, that sounds like the worst life I can possibly think of. I think a better idea is eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we're going to die. Woo! No way. And that way I can make myself happy. Well, the paradox of our design from God is this, and I've said this before, so don't miss it. The paradox is this. The degree to which you live for yourself, you will be most miserable. And the degree that you live for Christ and his ideas, what he wants, the more satisfied you'll be. Because that's what you're designed to do. And you say, well, Jim, you're not making a good case. It sounds like you want me to get up tomorrow morning, and help old ladies across the street and give money to people and do all these kind things and feed the poor. And I got to tell you, at the end of my life, that looks really stinking boring. Just boring. When will I ever be happy? If I don't make myself happy, no one will make me happy for me. So I'm sorry. I think it's a stupid idea. And yet again, you come back to the design. You are designed to serve a king who loves you to the point of sacrificial death. You're designed for a relationship with him. And in that design, you find your greatest joy because that's the way he's made you. And the degree to which you say that's a stupid plan and you cut off from that and you go on your own, you find yourself the most miserable. Now, I've done social experiments about this with youth. and this is really cool. This actually works because this is the way God's made us. We would go on long trips. Karen's downstairs. She'd be smiling right now. Well, Joel remembers this. We'd be doing these long trips with the youth, maybe 2 weeks long. And before we'd leave home and before we'd climb in the vans and all that kind of stuff and leave, we'd usually have a ceremony somewhat like circling us all around and doing like a last prayer before we get in the vans and go off on this thing. Well, we're going off to serve people selflessly for 2 weeks. And so we'd say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Symbolically, we're going to leave me here. We're going to leave ourselves here. So in this circle, before we pray, I want you to take off a piece of clothing and throw it on the floor, symbolizing that's you and that you stays here. And everyone look around like, what? We take off a coat. Have to be modest. Sometimes take off a shoe. So then we throw it in the center, and I'd say, now look, that pile in the center, that is the selfish you. And from this point on, the selfish you stays here. From this point on, it's not about you anymore. From this point on, it's about you seeking the good of others 24/7. And when we come back to this spot in 2 weeks, you tell me how that went. So we do it. We'd have lapses on the road. People would pick up their coats and say, but I don't want to be selfish right now. And they'd be miserable. You hear what I'm saying? They'd be miserable. We'd come back at the end of those 2 weeks, and almost to a person they'd say, this has been the most remarkable section of my entire life. Do you know I committed, like you said, to serving other people for 2 weeks, and that's all I was concerned about, and this has been the best part of my life ever yet. How is that possible? You weren't looking for your own needs, and yet you came back the most enthused and joyful of any other context in your entire life. All the rest of the context of my life, I was totally consumed with me, and I was always miserable, and the universe didn't cooperate with me. And now that I gave up about me, I found joy. Well, that is the paradox of joy, biblically speaking. The degree to which you are consumed with yourself, the most miserable you'll be. That's the bottom line. But the degree to which you put on Christ and do like he did, which was take up my cross, follow him, love others unconditionally 24/7, life takes on a sizzle and a delight and a joy that's just really hard to explain to people. And it's just slightly encompassed in that phrase, it's better to do good to others than to do good to yourself. You know? It's better to give gifts than to receive gifts. We know this somewhere in our unconscious. We know this. But the biblical idea is to do this fully, all the time. And mean it. Yeah, and mean it. And there you have this phrase in Hebrews. It talks about Jesus going to the cross. Who, now listen, this is about Jesus. Who for the joy set before him endured the cross. How can that ever be joyful? Joyfulness comes out of pouring yourself out for the best of others. I'm just saying, it works. All my social experiments have confirmed this. My entire life of 45 years walking with the Lord confirms this. And the next time you're sitting in a little pity party, miserable because the world's not cooperating with you, remember, when you do this bottom thing, you will be the most miserable. I'm just saying. It's true. So Paul's saying that when you're a citizen of this land, respect the people in charge. And when you're a citizen of the kingdom, do this. So when you're citizens of the land, remember, you need to honor and respect the office of the authorities over you. They're still broken people, but in your subjection to them, you might actually change them. And we have many examples in Acts, for instance, where this happened, where the change happens because you respect the authority, but you still challenge them on stuff. That's how you're a citizen of the land. Do good, respect the law, but also be a citizen of the kingdom, of God's kingdom. Both of the already kingdom, which is about loving, and the not yet kingdom, which is putting off the stuff that's going to go away anyway. Okay? That's how you live in this place. So remember, as you walk around, when you get pulled over by a policeman and the blue lights are turning around in your back window and you're thinking, oh man,
what did I do?
What did I do? Well, you usually know what you do. But be thankful that that blue light is in your rearview mirror, because that blue light brings order and peace from what could be extraordinary chaos. Extraordinary chaos. The reason why there are so many refugees coming out of Syria today is because all they have is chaos. And they would love to have a rule of law, even if it's slightly twisted. They'd love to have a rule of law that preserves peace and that brings judgment and justice against people who choose to exploit each other. That would be great. So that's what he's saying. Be a citizen of this land and recognize that that's God's plan for justice right now and peace right now. They're not perfect people. They're Wyatt Earps. They're going to have these seamy sides as well as a good side, but their office is meant for your good. And then while you're there, kind of, feeling uncomfortable under the rule of the law of this land, and they're jerks anyway. While you're there, remember, but hey, I'm not just a citizen of this place. I'm a citizen of another place as well. I have a dual citizenship. Look at my passport. And as a citizen of the other place, I'm committed unconditionally to the best of others. And I'm committing to putting off the dark junk that's here, because pretty soon it's going to all go away anyway. And that stuff's anyway all aimed at my flesh and my desires and my appetites. Just let that go. So while you're here as a citizen of this land, stop living for you and start living for others, because that's exactly what his Spirit wants to do through you. Here's the issue. And I was going to get into this, but I decided not to. But since you asked, I'll do this anyway. The Christian life is about a community of people who are subjecting themselves to each other and loving each other, so that at the time that you stop loving you, you'll have hundreds of people that are loving you instead. So you love yourself by allowing them to love you. Well, that's just truth, so I'm not double speaking it. That's just the way it works. Because again, the skeptic will say, if I don't look out for my own good, my own joy, I'm not going to be a happy person. Well, wait a second. If I have scores of people whose commitment is to my good, I've got 20, 50, 100 people who are committed to my good. When I'm doing it for myself, I just got me. It's actually a great deal. And on top of that, God waits for that kind of selflessness so he can pour in through those people in other contexts to bring you life. It's the time that you let go of life for yourself. Jesus said this. That's when you'll find life. It'll pour in from the outside. Oh, that's cool stuff. Yeah, Marie, you say?
The Holy Spirit dwells within us.
Yes, the Holy Spirit dwells in us. And he's our, yeah, exactly. There's more than meets the eye here. So the ones who want to preserve their life are going to lose it. But the ones who give their life away will find it. That's exactly what he was saying. That's exactly the application. Whew. Wow, that's too much to think about. My head is full.
You just described my past.
Yes, all our past, Brandon, all our past.
Yep.
But the sunrise is coming. The end of this age is near. And so when the sun comes up, take off Mr. Selfish suit and throw it on the floor. And realize that life with God and allowing him to work through you to love others is life abundant. Just try it and come back to me. We'll call everyone a social experiment, okay? So let's pray. Father, it's hard. It's just hard to accept that this is the way things are supposed to work. And Lord, going back to government, it's hard to not shake my fist at the people who abuse their authority and who do poorly and who actually exploit the people that they're supposed to be caring for. And God, that makes us mad. So give us the ability through your Spirit to respect the office of the authority you've given, while at the same time being dutiful to speak out against injustice that's foisted upon those for whom justice is supposed to come. To speak out against the injustice, to speak out not because we are politically motivated, but because we are committed to the best of those around us. And sometimes government doesn't do what's best. So Lord, give us the wisdom about how to do both at the same time, to respect the office and yet to speak out for the best of those who we love. And God, as citizens of this kingdom, I just pray you'd continue to transform our minds and our hearts about what you have in store for us here and now as citizens of this other kingdom, and with those who are looking forward to the consummation of this great kingdom you're bringing, so that we might understand the time is short and it's time to let this stuff go. And to realize that the appetites of the flesh are just that. They're just appetites that are settling for second best all the time. Because, Lord, we want you. We want you. And we want life from you. So, God, this is a lot this morning. Use your Spirit to give us remembrance as we go through the week, to chew on this as we walk and find ourselves in real situations. And God, endorse our passport of our simultaneous citizenship in your kingdom, so that those around us will say, I know you live here, but you don't look like you're from here because you act so differently. That we might create opportunity to talk about you. So thanks for all this now in Jesus' name. Amen.